You know, for someone who's an avid enthusiast of almost every Ace Attorney game there is, my experience with similar games outside of the series has been surprisingly limited. And by surprisingly limited, I mean that I have literally zero experience other than Ghost Trick Phantom Detective, which barely counts. So I figured that while we're all waiting for Capcom to release the next entry in the fabled Ace Attorney series, now is a better time than any to turn our attention towards the indie scene. Indie games have become synonymous with their ability to recreate the magic of dormant game series while simultaneously being able to establish their own unique identities. When larger studios can't deliver, you can always rely on a smaller team to cook up something just as good, if not better. And let's not beat around the bush here, some of the greatest video games of all time are indie titles that were made by just a handful of people and cost a fraction of a AAA game. Shovel Knight, Hollow Knight, Undertale, Slay the Spire, Bug Fables, I could go on and on. And as I'm sure you can guess, Ace Attorney is one such series that dedicated indie developers have taken inspiration from when developing their very own games. So for the purposes of this video, I wanted to take a look at 3 different Ace Attorney-like indie games that caught my eye and share my thoughts on them for anyone that may be itching for their next opportunity to slam desks as hard as they can and scream objection at the top of their lungs. Before we get started, I must make mention of the fact that I was provided a review code for 2 of the 3 games that I will be discussing here today. However, my opinions will be entirely my own. So with that said, join me as I delve into 3 different Ace Attorney-like indie games that might just be worth your time and attention. Let's begin. If you're looking for a much more unique experience that shares the bones of a typical Ace Attorney game, then you might be interested in Outlawyer. This is the only one of the 3 games that I wasn't provided a review code for, and that's because a demo covering the game's first case is all that is currently available. Despite that, what is here majorly impressed me, and in many ways, it might just be the best of the games that I'll be discussing today. In this game, you take control of Ned Kelly, a mysterious Australian man who wears a metal helmet and serves as a defense attorney for those who have passed on. And yes, you heard me right. Rather than defend your client in a traditional courtroom, this game has you advocating for your recently deceased client in a courtroom that serves to decide whether they'll be sent to heaven, hell, or purgatory, where they will be rehabilitated and eventually sent to heaven. This naturally means that the game has a lot of religious imagery and themes, with it taking all the tropes of what the afterlife looks like and putting fun, lighthearted spins on them. A perfect example of this is the game's prosecutor character, Satan, who shares no relation to the devil from the Bible. A fact that he makes incredibly clear because I imagine that mix-up happens quite often. Meanwhile, the Archangel Azrael essentially serves as a witness character who summarizes the life of the defendant, and the judge goes by the name of Saint Peter. In addition to its religious theming, Outlawyer also places heavy emphasis on world history, as its human characters directly draw from their real-world counterparts. This is the case for the defendant, Nikolai Alexandrovich Romanov, and it's also the case for the aforementioned protagonist, Ned Kelly. What's fun about both this religious and historical theming is that it doesn't take itself too seriously. Rather than attempt to be as historically accurate as possible, Outlawyer instead opts to have fun with its concepts and simply do what would be the most interesting, which I think was the right move. When it comes to the game itself, things should feel rather familiar to fans of a certain spiky-haired lawyer. As defense attorneys, players are tasked with defending their client from accusations of committing various sins while they were alive. And they can do so by spotting contradictions in the summary of their client's life and providing the much-needed context needed to clear their name. I will admit that the gameplay is not quite as engaging as its Inspirations gameplay, as it doesn't provide players with many choices when looking for contradictions, but its unique systems are fun nonetheless. I imagine that future cases will attempt to make things a little bit more challenging, so I'm looking forward to seeing how exactly that will work. One change that I really do like is that instead of a typical penalty system, players are given a rank at the end of a case. I find this to be an infinitely better system because it discourages save stating while still awarding careful and thoughtful play. And besides, I was never too bothered by the slightly shallow gameplay because of how great the writing and aesthetic of this game is. The writers clearly understand what makes Ace Attorney tick, as they manage to successfully replicate that delicate method of guiding players towards where they want them to be and fool them into believing that they reach that point on their own. When it comes to characters, I love Ned Kelly as the protagonist. His personality, confidence, and general aesthetic are all amazing. Satan is a similarly fun character. That feels so wrong to say. And he probably has the best artwork in the game so far. On top of all of this, Outlawyer is fully voiced, which honestly surprised me. This even applies to when players end up choosing incorrect answers, which I know should be a given, but I still think that's a testament to the amount of work that was done here. I was especially surprised when I was provided with a long list of options, chose the wrong one, and was presented with a fully voiced segment where characters discuss in detail why that particular choice is wrong. That's a lot of effort for dialogue that most players will likely never see, and I have to respect that. The voice work itself is pretty darn good too, though the audio mixing could certainly use a little work. I especially like the voices of Ned Kelly and a character that I won't mention here, but if you've played the demo, then you probably know who I'm talking about. Overall, I think that Outlawyer looks incredibly promising, and since the demo is only a couple of hours long, I highly recommend giving it a go if you're in the least bit interested. If you vibe with the world that the developers have crafted here, then you'll no doubt be itching for more by the time you're done, just like I am. And while you're at it, pay attention to the Kickstarter backers in the credits. You might just find a certain somebody in there. If you're looking for a heartfelt, emotional story that will leave an impact on you long after the credits roll, then you will most certainly like Detective Instinct: Farewell, My Beloved. In this game, players take control of an unnamed protagonist at the tail end of a study trip that they took to the fictional country of Vendreka. Vendrika? I'm really not sure. As I'm sure you can guess, a murder occurs in the hotel that he, his fellow student Emma, and his professor Mr. Martin are staying at. And as the group hops on a train in order to head back home, the plot thickens as Emma informs him of a missing woman on the train. From there, they need to work to uncover both mysteries and find out if and how the two events tie together, leading them on a wild goose chase that takes them far deeper down the rabbit hole than they could have ever imagined. More than any other game in this video, this game is a very story-focused adventure. The gameplay is incredibly basic, but the developers had a story to tell here, and that story alone is more than worth the game's price point in my opinion. The highlight here is definitely the characters. If you're a fan of deep, morally complex characters like I am, then this is most certainly the game for you. Characters like Emma and Mr. Martin are incredibly well written, while characters like Dennis and Palmer are absolutely hilarious. The fact that these two buffoons do almost the exact same poses and sync those poses up with one another never failed to crack me up. Even characters that I initially disliked, like the bartender and the strange couple, ended up becoming really interesting in their own ways. So all in all, I love the whole cast here. I could easily see myself writing up a video essay on any one of these folks, and I think that's a testament to the game's writing overall. The mystery itself is also quite engaging and surprisingly clever. There were several instances where I thought I had the plot figured out, only to be swiftly proven wrong. This game is a lot smarter than I expected it to be, because it fed me enough details for me to think that I knew what was going on, but not enough for me to truly see the whole picture until the time was right. And that's some darn good storytelling right there. When it comes to presentation, the sprite work is very nice, but the music is a particular standout here. Some tracks, like the crime scene theme and Detective Daltrey's theme, are groovy as hell, while other tracks are very emotional and serve to increase the impact of some key moments. As I stated, the actual game mechanics are really not all that intuitive. You're essentially just checking off a bunch of boxes before moving on to the next area. And while I know that's also essentially all you do during investigations in Ace Attorney, steps were at least taken to make those sections just a tad more interesting by giving players more choices with how they wanted to tackle things. Here, that process of checking off boxes is much more apparent, making the game feel more like a visual novel than Ace Attorney ever did in my eyes. However, as I said, I don't think that the mechanics are trying to be anything spectacular. I believe that they simply exist as a means to tell this delightful story. And to me, that's enough, honestly. It doesn't have that much in common with Ace Attorney on a gameplay level, but it has the same heart, the same soul that Ace Attorney has. The developers clearly understood what made Ace Attorney's stories as impactful as they were, and they managed to capture that magic when crafting their own. I can safely say with confidence that I was getting teary-eyed by the end of this short and sweet adventure. It only took me roughly 5 hours to reach the end, but those 5 hours were charming, pleasant, and meaningful. And honestly, that's all I really have to say about this game in particular. I unfortunately can't delve too deep into things without getting into major spoiler territory, so you're kinda just gonna have to take my word for it here. I promise that this is one worth experiencing. If you're someone that values having some level of gameplay depth in your video games, then I would tread with caution here. But if a nice 5-hour story that will likely make you cry sounds right up your alley, then I'd say give Detective Instinct Farewell My Beloved a try. If you really enjoy the process of working through complex and interesting murder mysteries through engaging gameplay mechanics, then I think that Paper Perjury might be more your speed. In this game, players take control of Justina Smith, a newly hired police clerk working at Azure City's police department. And while this seemingly means that all Justina will be doing at her new job is sorting through paperwork, it doesn't take long for her to be dragged into some real action, taking her through 5 whole cases of crime-solving goodness. Out of all the games in this video, Paper Perjury is easily the most complete of the bunch. There's a really decent amount of content to get through here, and it all pays homage to its inspiration with pride. While the previous 2 games that I discussed attempted to do a lot more of their own thing, this game has all of the Ace Attorney staples. Full investigation sequences where players comb through multiple locations and question witnesses, intense cross-examinations that come in the form of interrogations in this game, and a colorful cast of characters with delightfully punny names. I mean, one of the very first names you read is Chandra Lear, and that's how I knew that I was getting into something good. However, what I think makes Paper Perjury an especially noteworthy game is how it takes these classic systems and either alters or expands upon them. A perfect example of this is how questioning witnesses during investigations is handled. In a typical Ace Attorney game, psych locks were used as a way to spice things up during investigations by bringing a little bit of contradiction-finding action into them. They would appear to signify to players when a witness was keeping some sort of secret, and it would then be up to them to break through the locks guarding that secret once they had the appropriate evidence to do so. Here, however, almost everyone provides a statement regarding the crime being investigated, and players are not informed whether they are telling the truth or lying. Instead, it falls on the player to gather as much evidence as possible, compare that evidence with all the provided statements, and then figure out which witness is lying on their own. This adds a great deal of complexity to the classic psych-lock system, as it really made me feel like a true detective for figuring things out. At the same time, it also meant that things could be somewhat challenging. With so many pieces of evidence and so many statements to sift through, there were certainly times where I was struggling to figure out what exactly to do next. I would say that the inflated amount of evidence is probably my biggest complaint here, as it does feel like things could have been consolidated more. But the game does have a lot of points where it can tell what you were thinking when you present the wrong answer and pushes you in the right direction. So while I was stuck at times, it was never for too long, and it made those moments when I finally did figure things out all the more satisfying. When it comes to interrogations, they function exactly like one would expect them to. But one nice change to them is not in the gameplay itself, but the pacing. Don't get me wrong, I love the Ace Attorney series to pieces, but those games undeniably drag their feet at times by struggling to get to the point and wasting an excessive amount of time on one minor detail. Paper Perjury, on the other hand, has breakneck pacing during its interrogation segments, with what would have taken hours in a typical Ace Attorney game instead taking mere minutes, and I honestly really appreciate that. Things are constantly moving and, by extension, kept interesting, and combine that with the engaging investigation mechanics, and I was honestly hooked. I got caught in a vicious cycle of wanting to do just one more segment, but then I gotta see what happens next, so maybe just one more, and then I hit the credits before I knew it. If Detective Instinct Farewell My Beloved was a story-focused adventure, then Paper Perjury is definitely a gameplay-focused one, as I was definitely drawn in by the solid mechanics more than anything else. That's not to say that the game has nothing else going for it though, far from it, as the game features a very interesting overarching plot across its 5 cases as well as a solid cast of characters. My favorite of the bunch is definitely Ferris Eubank, who essentially serves as the game's main rival character. Her character arc is easily the most interesting in my eyes, and what is probably my favorite moment in the game is centralized around her. But I won't spoil that moment here because it would be criminal to ruin that surprise for you. Also, I wasn't sure where to mention this, but I need to point out the fact that this game makes mention of a stepladder, suspicious looking nooks and crannies, Final Fantasy VI, my man, Ghost Trick Phantom Detective, and Detective Gumshoe's salary cuts. And honestly, that showed me how easy I am to please because that alone made this a 10 out of 10. Top it all off with some solid sprite work and some bangin' music, and you honestly have a really complete package to substitute for the lack of Ace Attorney games right now. But that's not all, as the developers recently released a bonus 6 case as a free update. And yeah, it's probably the best case in the game. You can really tell that the developers learned a lot from creating the base game and resolved to go all out here. The visuals are better than ever, the characters are probably the most complex yet, and the mystery itself is a real good one. No notes, the team did a great job here. It is more than clear to me that Paper Perjury is a game that was made by the fans, for the fans. This is evident in its gameplay, it's evident in its story, and it's evident in its ability not only to draw from its inspiration's formula, but to evolve that formula. Much like the other games in this video, it comes highly recommended. Overall, I think that all three of these games are worth your time for almost entirely different reasons, which I find to be fascinating. I hope I didn't come off as too much of a shill here because I genuinely had a great time with all of these games. And while none of them were perfect by any means, I believe that they accomplished what they set out to do, which is honestly all I can ask for. To summarize, I think that if you're looking for something with a unique aesthetic and creative world, check out Outlawyer. If you're looking for a beautiful story full of well-written characters, check out Detective Instinct: Farewell My Beloved. And if you're looking for a content-rich love letter to Ace Attorney with engaging and complex gameplay, then check out Paper Perjury. The former game is entirely free, and the latter two games are actually available in a Steam bundle at a discounted price that you'll be able to find in the description of this video. It's my hope that you'll give at least one of these games a try, because I truly believe that they are all gems in their own ways. Thank you for watching, and be sure to let me know if you plan on checking out any of these games, or if you already have, in the comments down below. And while you're down there, consider hitting the subscribe button for more deep dives into all things Ace Attorney. For now though, that's all from me. Take care of yourselves.